before I do that and before I just totally take this microphone, maybe we do open mic. Anyone have stuff you want to share, things you've been working on, feedback you want on anything, thoughts, feelings, etc. before I talk about both those things?
Oh, I've got something to share. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, your audio is 6 out of 10 quality, but we can hear you.
Okay, cool. We're going to have to work with that. Quick comment, standard combo, great work. Love the scenes that you've been building and the characters look really great. Curious to know if that's done all in Blender. But I'll hear from that later. So, quick screen share. Just like to update, we'll just see if I can share the entire screen. Share. So, since the last Gitcoin grants, which really, a big thanks to everyone who contributed and who made it possible. Since then, we've we've updated the first phase of our helms to make them look a little bit better, and we've gone on to the phase 2, where we've developed some more of the helms, and trying to craft each one individually. So, and we've got our preview website up, and it's available. People can check it out. And then we've got the model viewer for each and every helm. And we're getting there. Phase 2 is almost complete, but there's a lot of helms, and there's still quite a lot to make. But we're liking the progress, and our materials are looking a little bit better. And yeah, that's pretty much me. I'll keep it brief today.
Can you screen share that part again? I just missed it. I wanted to see.
Sure. So yeah, we've got that preview of the next helms, and each one has a little 3D viewer like this.
Whoa. That is awesome.
Thanks. Peeps can check it out, and if they're interested, you can see the website link, and it's just a preview for now. We welcome any comments, critiques, inputs. We're happy to hear your comments.
They look amazing. I would like to see some stats, just because I'm also like a 3D nerd, and I would like to know how many triangles and materials and I don't know, like stuff that Sketchfab shows you. Maybe could even just leverage Sketchfab.
Marcel, thanks for sharing that. Looks really good. Or Michael. Did you want to do any rap there? We're having all sorts of IT audio stuff this morning, huh?
What? Rap?
Sorry, maybe is that just me? I can't hear Marcel, but maybe that's just my audio.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I can't hear you there.
Okay. I thought maybe he wanted to wrap up something there. But yeah, sorry, Marcel, your audio stopped working. Funny. I was thinking we could switch to a Twitter space. Maybe not today, but maybe we should switch over to Twitter space in the future and see how that flies. I know there's a lot of people who pay attention to the Lootverse via Twitter from afar as opposed to Discord. So maybe for the next one we'll try that. Can't really do screen share in the same way though.
I really like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, we need a
Link below
Discord
the tweet.
video recorder, and we need a Twitter screen sharing app for Spaces. Those two things would be
Periscope.
huge. Periscope?
Yeah, right below the Twitter space, there's a link to the Periscope.
All right, didn't even know you could do that. That's awesome. I'm gonna check that out then. My friend started Periscope. Sweet. Okay, well, Marcel, if you do want to hop back in here, I guess interrupt me. You got to fix your audio though. We see that you're talking, but can't hear anything. But yeah, Helm stuff looks incredible. Immaculate detail, like Jin just said. Agreed. Anybody else want to hop in? Glosso, any thoughts from you?
Yeah,
Your presentation's been getting a lot of play and love.
Yeah, I've been busy. Yeah. So I'm screen recording, so I'm aware that the YouTube videos kind of switch to like my desktop and stuff. But I think I'll just talk. Maybe I'll present something a little more formal next week. So last week I was at the Radical Exchange Unconference on soul-bound tokens in decentralized society. For those of you that aren't familiar, Radical Exchange is like a kind of like non-profit slash like I guess like social movement for next generation political economies. It was founded by the economist Glenn Weil, and they've had like an enormous influence on the space, and have kind of like come up with a lot of new ideas for how to kind of organize radically our democracies and society. And the most recent one being the soul-bound tokens standard that they put together with Vitalik. So anyways, I presented there, and I talked extensively about loot and emergent art, and people went kind of crazy for it. They really, really loved it, and I've been in kind of talks with a lot of folks in the Radical Exchange world, and then the kind of like democratic governance world more in general. I think the reason they went so crazy for it, and the reason I was excited to talk there about emergent art and loot, is because I see these kind of like two worlds as being like very symbiotic. Like loot is this like radically new way of organizing people democratically, and this like practice of building primitives is basically this like new kind of social technology for people to kind of self-organize in this massive like art making democracy and economy. And then at the same time, there's this whole new renaissance of thinkers that have all these radical new ideas for democratic organization and political economy. And the only way that people will be able to actually, you know, really imagine on like a grand cultural scale how to like, you know, change up our kind of like failing world is by like imagining these new forms inside like artworks, right? Like you can actually like really start to think about what a multi-ethnic democracy is when you like watch Star Trek, but it's a lot harder for the average person to imagine that just from like an economics textbook. So anyways, like a lot of my work, I think over the next few months is going to be trying to like bridge these two worlds so that we can bring like a focus towards the kind of like governance of the lootverse and the kind of art of governing the lootverse. So yeah, I'll share something more kind of like formal about that, and then, you know, start to like build those bridges and connect our worlds together. But that's been what I've been up to, and I can tell you that people definitely are extraordinarily excited about the vision that Loot is building, and they really do see it as this like emancipatory, freeing thing. So yeah, it's been really, really meaningful. So that's what I've been up to.
Galasso, people often tell me that I put mouthfuls of big words to ideas like this, and I think I found my match in you.
Yeah.
Really good stuff. And yeah, I've been sharing your presentation around as well. It's really, really good. It may need
Appreciate
both.
the support.
Everybody, experiences media differently. You may want to write a mirror post, make it like a formal emergent artwork, a thesis statement or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and like make a lot of this stuff like very, very palatable and use a lot of different media for it, so that it's not all 3-syllable word rants. So yeah, that's incoming.
Emancipatory. That was like a 6-syllable one. Emancipatory democracy. Yeah, really cool. Maybe to close us out today too, somebody can share some music as well, just since we got you and 1337 on.
I'm thinking of creating a media storage with navigation or Lootverse related media files so that anyone who creates something can easily find existing works such as music, images, icons, and other by simply entering the text. I'm thinking of starting with a centralized service and then evolving towards IPFS. What do you think about it?
I think it's a great idea. I think it will interplay really interestingly with the librarium that we're going to present today and the AI. So yeah, I love the idea of a multimedia service, like a catch-all database for the content of the Lootverse.
I have spent a lot of time, when searching for different artworks between different Discord servers. It was very hard, and I think that such service will solve this problem for all. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's a great idea. Let us present the librarium and let us present the AI, and that may trigger some thoughts for you as well. We're building the librarium, at least for now, as an open source product, so I even wonder if you could build a multimedia section of the librarium. I asked Treppers to hop on this call. Oh, he's there. Nice. He may have some opinions and thoughts about that as well. Anybody else want to talk open mic before I grab it and talk through Gitcoin round and then the librarium and the AI? No? All right, I'm going to do it then. Cool. Let me share a screen. All right, I want to show, actually, let's do nuts and bolts quickly. We just, if everybody remembers, we did the Gitcoin ecosystem round with a 75 ETH grant that went to the Gitcoin program, which we then used quadratic funding to distribute across Lootverse projects plus independent donators. That was, in my opinion, a really good success, at least as a test case. It helped do some retroactive grants, and it also helped bootstrap some individuals to do their own individual projects, and even helped give some grants to groups and wider projects and companies. That was back in June. The next Gitcoin round starts now in the next 10 days. I think it starts September 7th. And there's a proposal up on the Royalty DAO, which is the on-chain treasury that contains Loot's royalties. It's not a huge treasury, and it's not ever gonna be a huge treasury just from the direct trading fees of Loot. But since we have it, and since that's a really sort of equitable way to be allocating the way that Loot's treasury works, and it's totally decentralized way, there's another proposal up here to take a slightly smaller chunk this time, a 50 ETH grant, give it to a Gitcoin ecosystem round. It's used as a matching fund against what everybody else is voting for with their wallets, if you will. Proposals up, just went up last night, I think. Yeah, it was 4 a.m. last night, at least my time. It's up for the next 3 days. We need to hit a quorum for it to pass. And obviously, there's pros and cons here. The pro being it's exciting and all the things I just said. The con being, Loot has a limited set of ETH to help fund the ecosystem. And so if people have other ideas of better ways to use this small pot of ETH to advance the Lootverse, This is a decentralized project with no team, no owner. It's all of us just hacking through the mist together, figuring out a path towards the other side. But for now, I think this isn't like some huge proposal. If you do have a loot bag and you want to come vote for it, please do, or vote against it, please do. We need to get to a quorum, though, so we got to get up to at least 155 loot bags to vote for it. It does cost a little bit to vote. It's like probably $5 of ETH or $5 of gas or something like that. But you can probably look at that as maybe a feature, not a bug. It's us expressing like we are here and we're here for it and we're committed to this space. royaltydao.com/vote. I'll put up a link here too. I might even tweet this one because again, a lot of people don't join the Discord. Just listen to these later or follow the tweets. Any comments though on this? This is me just channeling the voice of the ecosystem. I put the proposal out because someone wants to propose it, but obviously this is for all of us.
I have a question in the comment. I go as Sasquatch. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, but I haven't ever been to a loot town hall despite holding one for a very long time. So it's just really cool to hear progress here. I was just curious. So with this kind of Gitcoin funding, is it really the intent to kind of kind of fund seeds across the entire ecosystem? Across as many projects as possible, or could you kind of explain a little bit more about how you see the benefit of these Gitcoin rounds?
Yeah. So unlike Nouns, where Nouns has a massive treasury and people can make direct proposals for, I want 75 ETH to upgrade the website. Give me 300 ETH to make a book. Give me 800 ETH to host an event. That kind of stuff. The people are doing it to Nouns. With Loot doesn't really have a meaningful treasury. It's 172 ETH right now, just from royalties. Loot's royalty was set to 0 for 95% of Loot's trading, and it has been set to 5%, but that was after all the chaos and craziness. So Loot's treasury, I say that point to say that Loot's treasury is not an economic engine to fuel the Lootverse. It's a small treasury that we can use to test ideas or give people a little bit of boosts of energy, but not in any sort of massive or mega sustainable way. So with that said, as opposed to doing individual on-chain grants where someone says, I want 3 ETH to help me with this project, or can I propose 0.7 ETH to help me with this other project, it's just too expensive to get to 155 votes. I think the cost of doing 155 votes on chain, or even this one, 345 votes on chain, times the $5 is a couple $1,000s per vote, even just to do a single vote. So Gitcoin ends up being a really effective and efficient model, both in terms of the cost model, but also in terms of the methodology, that doing it through Gitcoin gives us exposure to the wider story that Loot is not only an exciting project that we're all participants in and co-owners of, but Loot is also a public good for the wider ecosystem. Loot is a public good for Ethereum. Loot's a public good for Web3, if you will. And the reason I say it's a public good is that Loot often acts as a bridge to bridge people into this universe in a way that's unexpected and not DeFi and not crazy, pumpy, weird NFT stuff. To each their own. But Loot is not that. Loot is a place where, even on this call, we've got writers and musicians and builders and storytellers and artists and more. And so Loot ends up acting as this sort of an invitation or a bridge or maybe a lighthouse in this dark, crazy sea of Web3. And so in that sense, it's kind of a public good, which means that when we do a Gitcoin round, it's not just the few people on this phone call and the Lootverse owners who come in and give grants. It ended up being, I think, a couple thousand people that gave grants in the last one in June. And those couple thousand people are coming from outside the direct Loot ecosystem. And so this is also a way for us to raise our hand and say, hey, we're all here working on this fun stuff. And if not a Lootverse owner, but just somebody who's giving out grants to public goods for the Ethereum network or L2s and more, but someone who believes in the broader space, Loot is an interesting place to give grants to. So long answer to your question, the the first proposal, if you read through it, has some notes about like the kind of things that we would like to see, but also wide open. But the kind of things fit in these three categories: loot versus public goods. That's things like help me with the website, Loot Foundation, Loot Town Squares, like this call we're on right now. If somebody wanted to upgrade the subgraph, stats contracts, distillation contracts, the bridges to L2s, etc., fit in the category of public goods. There's early stage lootverse projects and builders where just a little bit of support and expression of excitement from the community and some grants can go a long way. And then 3 is like the broad category of multimedia, bringing the lootverse to life with stories, multimedia, music, art, etc. And I'd say the 4th category is like something unexpected that nobody has even thought of yet. The last round had 19 grants. You can skim through them here. People can also submit these grants for the next round as well. But we're hoping to see, obviously, some more people show up and raise their hands and say, "Hey, this is interesting. I'm intrigued by this, and a little bit of a grant could get me started."
Awesome. I mean, I really appreciate that answer. Thank you for breaking it down more. I just because you mentioned nouns at the top of the answer, or the top of your answer, have you thought about prop house at all, or has that been a discussion here?
Yeah, prop house would be great. I don't think we have enough active governance or enough money to make it worthwhile. But I do think that it could be great in a loot-verse future where loot does have sustainable fuel for the ecosystem. Doing it through prop house makes a ton of sense.
Gotcha. Also, just one comment I noticed in chat. Are you aware of like the looks rare like treasury amount? I mean, like the amount that's coming from looks rare particularly.
Yeah, that was from a while ago. That was when Looks Rare was doing that scammy thing with people doing
Trading,
pennies in front of steamroller wash trading. The spirit of, I'd say, like, I don't want to speak for everybody. The spirit of loot, in my opinion, says that we should send that back to the person who sent a 450 ETH royalty to the loot treasury. That person does trade in the hundreds of millions of dollars range. So who knows if it's a bot or a fund or whatever. But still, like it kind of feels like we accidentally picked up somebody's wallet on the street and it contained 450 ETH. Or like they accidentally left their wallet in our Uber or something. So I'm of the mind that we want to send it back. That said, I am not the person, or I do not want to have my name on a transaction that sends 450 ETH into the ether to an anonymous wallet, given the events of late in anonymous Web3 stuff. But I do think that the spirit of loot is feeling like we should send that back.
Interesting. Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, Tim, I was just going to say it's kind of interesting because I had noticed that we didn't have the royalty. Certainly wasn't thinking we should like try to trap a wash trader. But at least it would, at the very least, it would be worth seeing if that's still an active wallet. Seeing that, I don't know if that person's come forward anywhere about it at all. But just some things. There's certainly other considerations before we just voted to throw it back.
Agreed. Yeah, just burning it into.
Otherwise, in spirit, in spirit, I'm with you personally.
Yeah, we could have a whole separate call about that one. The craziness of DAOs, huh? Just 450 ETH, which at the time was, I don't know, ETH was probably at 3,000 or something, just thrown around like that. But I would say let's not let it distract us. If we can find a way to reach that wallet, obviously, then can invite that person to a Loot Town Square and let them tell us what they'd like to do with it. But it's also not up to me or up to any individual. It would still have to go through a vote because the treasury is managed through that on-chain vote. But yeah, I'd say let's put a pin on that one.
I have a question about the treasury in general. Also from like personal experience on how much the Gitcoin round last one like changed my life and helped me make this art. Is there like, have we kind of discussed or thought about different ways that we could like continually and sustainably like replenish that treasury? The kind of like Gitcoin model of sending money to all of these different projects and voting through the quadratic funding thing. It seems like actually like a really good system for this thing, and it's like early days, and I'd be really curious about ways that we could like keep that going. So yeah.
Yeah, that's also a conversation that's happening, and a really big, exciting, broad conversation. I would say there's two mechanisms to do that, very broadly speaking. One mechanism is for the loot DAO or the loot ecosystem to reclaim some ownership of loot itself, and then be able to sell it, like the way that Noun sells more loot. You know, number one way is that a project owns some of its own project. Right now, loot owns no loot, so loot can't sell any loot because loot doesn't own any loot. But that would be one big category. The second big category would be setting up a precedent such that when people do get grants, they then tribute some of the value they create back to the DAO. And so far that hasn't happened at all with loot, which is really interesting. There have been some incredibly big projects that have been extensions of loot, Magic Treasure, Realms, even my own project, the Genesis project. You know, these have been successful, Hyperloot, Loot Explorers, more, and have created a lot of value, but there hasn't been a precedent of sending anything back to the loot DAO, which I think people overlook. Everyone's like, you give it to loot owners, so like the loot bags received a lot of that value. Loot bags got a bunch of A gold. Loot DAO got none. Loot bags got a bunch of magic tokens. Loot DAO got none. Loot bags still have free Genesis mana inside them that you can claim and make Genesis adventures and then sell them if you want to. But Loot DAO, didn't get any of that because it doesn't own any loot bags. And the same goes for kind of every derivative and extension of the lootverse, that when value is created, it goes to the loot bags or the more loot bags or whatever. But it doesn't go to the loot DAO because the loot DAO, A, doesn't own any loot to derive that value, and B, hasn't had a precedent to receive tributes back from people who are creating value within the loot ecosystem. So I think both of those categories would be really interesting for us to brainstorm down. The latter is probably easier in a sense because it's more like a social dynamic. The former is also incredibly interesting. If you've seen my screen, there is a conversation happening about how we could design a model such that we upgrade loot from like Windows 95 to Windows XP, or from loot maybe from the iPhone or the iPad, loot from the iPad, what is it called? The iPod. Loot from the iPod to the iPhone. What can we do to like upgrade loot in the exact way that Glosso is talking about here, so that loot is not only a better canvas for world building, but also comes up with a sustainable model to reclaim some ownership of itself such that it can fund an ecosystem in a sustainable way. I don't have all the answers, but I have thought through the problems deeply, and that's how I would characterize that problem space. What do you think about that, Glosso?
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I'm wondering how anyone that's interested, such as myself, could get involved in that conversation. I think in like the long term, the ecosystems that are the most like equitable and that like fund new creators the best are going to be the ones with that are just going to be the most vibrant and rich. So I'm really invested in however we can make that happen. So yeah, those are really interesting.
From the beginning, I do think it's been a feature, not a bug, that loot had no fuel. Because instead of people showing up and raising their hand and saying, "Hey, send me ETH and I'll do something for you," there's never any vibe at loot of like doing it for you or like working for loot, because loot doesn't have anything to give. It's like the giving tree. If you remember that story, loot has sort of like given everything, and all it is now is this foundation. These roots in the ground, and on top of it, we're now building a world together. And so it means that the beginning, the like first year of loot, was characterized by people building extensions on top of loot, because they felt compelled to, which speaks exactly to your emergent art feeling, like it just manifested in everybody's minds, I need to go do something, and B, required everyone to come up with their own sustainable value creation model, as opposed to relying on a a one-time and maybe unsustainable model for value creation. So I think for the first year, it's a feature, not a bug. But going forward, I do agree with you, Glasso, having a more sustainable system to be able to invite people into this ecosystem and actually give something to them, at least as a bootstrap to get them started before they can create their own value creation flywheels. I think that goes a really long way. Easier said than done, but I think that's hugely important. Anyone else want to talk about that? That's a really exciting and important topic, so I don't want to cut that short. I do want to share Librarium and the Eye, but I again, don't want to cut this combo short because it's a really important one. See how long I can do an awkward pause for.
Yeah, I also don't want to take too much space. But yeah, I'm interested in.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Is this about the librarian?
Yeah, this is the Librarium. I'm just teeing it up to be able to talk about it, but I wanted to let more of this conversation flow about value creation and systems and sustainable models for value creation and grants to the ecosystem for loot.
Have we explored dwork? Dwork is amazing for that. It ties really nicely into GitHub and Discord. I can show. I can do a little show and tell of it.
No, I know how dwork works. With dwork, though, don't you have? Isn't the idea that you create things to be able to have, like, people get paid to do little pieces of work and tack off to-do lists and projects and things?
Well, there's also a section for community suggestions that you can add in. You can tack on like little bounties for things, but it also can integrate into Coordinate if you wanted to do kind of like an airdrop sorts after a period of time, and also just in terms of value chains and storytelling. I just like the on-chain like stories text, and visualizing that. I would love to find ways of like composing more stuff on top of the metadata, like bones per se, like with all these AI tools coming out, it feels like we could create a sort of decentralized writer's room and visualize like storyboards together, especially if we get like the Mid-Journey bot in here or something.
Yeah, really cool, Jim. There's definitely so much energy towards hypermedia, multimedia storytelling and content, not in just the Lootverse, but also beyond. Yeah, I mean, that takes us in a different direction, Jin. dwork sounds awesome. The conversation that Glasso is bringing up is more about how does loot create sustainable value for itself so that it can give out things to people. Because loot right now doesn't have any loot, and loot doesn't have any ETH really, other than that, the small trading royalties. So that conversation is more about sustainability versus implementation.
I see. Interesting. Is there a multi-sig in place already?
Nope. Yeah, all of loot is just this royaltydao.com here that contains this on-chain treasury.
Oh, that's chunky, though.
Yeah, no, it's real. I don't want to dismiss it. With this scope and scale that we're operating at, this is a really nice way to do individual grants through Gitcoin type programs, but to be able to sustainably replenish, the fuel for the ecosystem, that's the really interesting, strategic conversation that we've been having over, honestly, like almost all of this year. And it feels like it's coming to a head, both in the market being ready for it, but also in the Lootverse builders showing up and saying, hey, we're here and we have a ton of stuff to do, and a little bit of grant or a little bit of ownership would go a long way.
What happened to A-Gold?
A-Gold was never given to Loot DAO. A-Gold was given to Loot Bags, but Loot actually doesn't have any A-Gold. A-Gold was working on a staking proposal so that bag holders could get some A-Gold, but Loot DAO doesn't have any bags. So yeah, super interesting creative problem space. We could probably have an entire all hands about this topic. I think it's important to tease apart the problem space and articulate the problem space really clearly versus talking straight to solutioning. Because yeah, you're right. We can talk about Gitcoin versus Prop House versus D-Work versus Coordinape versus other things. But those systems rely on an upstream problem being solved. And that upstream problem is a sustainable value capture model, either through us building it as a loot 2 or loot advancement or loot upgrade, or through a social model being introduced where when value is created on top of loot, some of it is attributed back to the loot DAO so that it can be used then to further the ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. I would love to have like a meetup just about that. My mind is jumping into virtual productions and getting into the writer's room, and because I really want to use loot as like part of the dressing room for doing like movies and games. You're creating assets that could be usable for both. And I really like the noun style model, just like, just some kind of like, it just feels cool that how it's kind of more better onboarding into kind of the culture than just doing a huge drop all at once. But yeah, we should do like a meetup just about kind of describing the problem space, mapping it out, and ways of kind of building something sustainable, like a flywheel effect for all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna DM you on the side.
Cool.
All right, well that was like 20 minutes on Royalty DAO Gitcoin stuff. For now, there we go, nice. We got 106 votes just on this call. Thanks, crew. For now, this is just a continued experiment space that I think we're experimenting with this model. And if anyone on this call is like, hey, I'm intrigued here and I've got a small idea, medium idea, or even big idea, a really nice place to socialize it is through this grant program, because it's a way to sort of focus yourself to say like, here's what I want to work on, and here's this like vision I have, and the why, and the what, and the purpose, and my vision for this thing articulated, and sort of putting yourself out there saying, hey, I want to work on this, and I'm probably going to work on this regardless of if I get a grant or not, but if I can have a grant along the way, that's going to give me more space in my life to be able to spend time on it. Okay, so that is Gitcoin stuff. I know everyone was excited to hear about the Librarium and the Eye, so I'm going to jump into that. I'm going to start with the Eye, I think. Yeah, I'm going to start with the Eye, and then I'll dive into Librarium. And we've got Treppers on here, and Banners, and Andrew, and who else here has worked on this with me? I guess those are the three. But this has been a cross-Lootverse labor of love. We've been working on this for like 6 months now. And this is launching in 48 hours on Loot's birthday in 48 hours. What is this thing? This thing I'm calling a magical device. It's an NFT, but it's a magical digital device that contains an on-chain world. And that on-chain world are the stories of the Lootverse. If you want to think about like what is this in maybe slightly more skeuomorphic terms, actually pause for a sec. You're seeing my screen, right? You are.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. If you want to think about this in like slightly more skeuomorphic terms, you could call it a collectible artifact, a collectible comic book. Imagine like an early first edition of a Spider-Man comic book. This thing itself is a collectible artifact. It also acts as a key, and I'll explain what I mean by key. And it also acts as a publishing pass, and it acts as a publishing pass to the Librarium, which is librarium.dev, an open source tool for on-chain storytelling. And so I'll unpack what that means across all three of these things. And Treppers, feel free to stop me anywhere if you want to talk tech stuff, strategy stuff, or whatever's on your mind. So when I say collectible artifact, what I mean here is this eye, which I'll show in its full glory, is one of the first dynamic NFTs that contains on-chain stories. So there are dynamic NFTs that contain on-chain art, like OKPC is a really cool example of that, and there's a number of others where obviously like people collect NFTs because it's like early caveman paintings, or it's beautiful art that you want to own and collect, or it's a set of things that you want to have, like they're collectibles, plus more. There's utility NFTs, and there's access pass NFTs and more. But I think in its simplest form, you could think of this eye as an art project, where instead of the art being pictures, the art is words. You guys know from a year of hearing from me, I like words, I like talking and I like storytelling, and I like writing. I appreciate writing and writers, and I appreciate the sort of awesome power of stories and what that, in a lot of ways, I think like storytelling is what makes us human. And so this project is a collectible artifact. I think it's best to think about it like an art project, where it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and when it's launched and done, and I'll explain what that means, it will exist on the blockchain forever, and it's just a piece of art. But the art is the stories. It itself also looks beautiful, and it itself is hand-drawn by an artist named Ryan, who I don't think is on the call today, but is incredible. But so this project, Collectible Artifact, contains lore and legends, contains facts and fictions, and contains stories of the past, present, and future of this expansive, infinitely expansive, still cohesive lootverse that we've all been playing in for the past year. This is the NFT itself, what you're looking at on the screen. So the idea here, and I can show a live version, might even be cooler. Yeah, let me show a Rink B version actually. Live demos are always funny, but this should work. Yeah. Cool, so here's the Rink B version. Don't share this. This is definitely not ready to be shared out yet. But the idea is that this artifact contains some stories, not only in the technology that we built. There's a lot of like hidden lore inside the contract and in the model and in the way that we've built this. But inside the NFT itself, it's a device. Imagine holding this in your hand. You're in a cavern and you reach down and you pick up this ancient device and you hold it, next to your loot bag, and it lights up, and you squint at it, and in your mind's eye, all of a sudden, there's stories inside this actual NFT, and you look at them and you say, wait, here's an actual story from the Middle Ages of the Lootverse. In this case, written by Banners Cajun, who's on the call, and this story doesn't just live in the NFT. This story lives on chain. And so that story, in this case, the painter, lives on chain. You can go all the way back to the Etherscan transaction. You can find the story. You can find who posted it, provenance all the way back to the person who posted it and published it. But it's also collected inside this NFT. And so when I say dynamic NFT, what I mean too is that as we as a community use this eye to publish news stories to the librarian, some of the best ones will be curated up globally and curated back to the eye. And so that this eye will be kind of like a living, breathing manifestation of the stories of the Lootverse, of the legends, of the proverbs, of the poems, of the encyclopedia entries, of the facts, of the fictions, and like I said, the lore and the legends of this universe that we're building together. It's the eye itself won't contain a million entries. The eye is like a curated collection, or the eye is like a curated comic book. And this is just the first one we're launching, the Genesis Eye. We can also launch a Ghost Eye, a Demon Eye, Divine Eye, fill in the blank. But I don't want to make any promises. I want to see how this hits first and see what people think about it. But the goal here is an NFT that represents the story world that we're building together. So that's number one. The eye as a collectible artifact. The eye is also a key. Using the eye, it unlocks a story world inside the website. If you go to the website, it's eyeforadventures.com. And I think I can tease it. I don't know if I have the latest staging URL, actually, Treppers. Yeah, maybe I can't tease this out just yet. But inside of this, when you log in, when you have an eye, mint an eye, and then own an eye, you'll be able to log into this website, and this website will contain higher fidelity versions of those stories, a nice reading experience, and the eye itself is like a token-gated key that allows you to access this website. Trevor's asked me to pop to here. One sec. Nice, yeah, okay, here's a preview. This is definitely for your eyes only. This is Rinkeby and testnet right now. But this is what the experience may look like for the actual story world that you can unlock using the eye as a key. That the idea being here that through your eye, you're experiencing visions of the past, present, and future of the Lootverse. You're sort of entering the virtual librarium in the sky, in the cloud, on the chain, and through that, you're experiencing stories and you're discovering stories. And so this website then brings those stories to life in a way that's not just on the NFT, but also ends up becoming like a full story world, and you can experience them. Today it's just reading, but for sure in the future, if this creates the energy that we hope it will, we can upgrade this website and make it so you can give feedback and comments and sign with your wallet and give tips to writers and yada, 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 everything that we can all imagine. But in the short term, when I say key, this is what I mean: a key to the story world and a key to the Eye for Adventurers curated collection of the librarian. And then the third thing is that this acts as a publishing pass to the librarian. But I haven't really showed the librarian yet, but let me show it in a second. But holding a key, holding an eye, acts as a publishing pass that allows you to publish stories to librarian.dev. And so instead of just showing this, I can actually show a live version of that. So the librarian.dev here is an open source tool for on-chain storytelling, not just for the Lootverse, but for the Hyperverse, for any writer who wants to publish on-chain, any community who wants to inscribe their lore, their stories, their world on-chain. The librarian is an open source utility, a tool, an MVP, a V1. Don't judge it too hard. This is our first implementation. We're more interested in the problem space than the exact current solution here. But the solution took, it was itself a labor of love and a really advanced, bunch of thinking that got us to this place. So this librarian contains entries, which are all on chain. And these entries can be, anything that a writer wants. Like I said before, facts and fictions, tomes, tales, prose, poems, journals, compendiums, character studies, snippets, scraps, stories, etc. And inside this librarian, then, there are entries from writers who hold publishing keys. One of them is, we just launched this like late 2 nights ago, so this is now only 24 hours old on mainnet. Ticklish got to be the first one to post something here too, a little snippet of something that you're working on that's amazingly a poem outside of the Lootverse, which I kind of love. And then the first Lootverse thing that was ever published to the librarian is right here, front and center. Dom posted this, I think, a couple hours ago. And I love this because it captures his vision for a vision for what loot is, like what a loot bag is. A bag that adventurers choose to seal much of their life and belongings, treasure, transportation, property, persona, and stories into the equipment itself. I think that's like a really broad metaphor and maybe a foreshadow of what's to come, that inside these bags is not just a gold, and it's not just items, and it's not just magic, and it's not just mana and things, but inside these bags are stories. And we're just starting to tease those stories out, one writer at a time, one person at a time, and in the writer's room together. This writer's room is the most active part of the Loot Discord I've ever seen. If you're interested, you don't have to be a writer to read it, and you don't have to be a writer to post in it either. The idea is that this is an open writer's room for world building together. It is chaotic, like Discord is chaotic, but there's some threads, and we do our best to keep it flowing. But this is just like Loot, permissionless, in that anybody who wants to write inside the Lootverse, thou mayest join. So yeah, this is the librarian, and then the idea is that if you hold a publishing pass, you can publish to it. You can publish a story, you can publish a snippet, you can publish an entire book. And Banners is publishing like an entire novel called The Painter, maybe like episode by episode. You can put in some art, cover art, story art, etc. You can choose your license. So this not everything has to be CCO. You can still publish something. Just because it's on the blockchain doesn't mean that someone's allowed to steal it from you. So if you want, you can publish a story and say, hey, all rights are reserved, or hey, no rights are reserved. Please take this story and run with it. And it's preset to be able to let the writer kind of choose the world that they're publishing in, publish into the Lootverse, publish into cryptodes, moonbirds, nouns, etc. And obviously, like, we can add more worlds to this over time. And then this is like a full publishing experience. Here, let me put in an example. I'm not going to actually publish this together, but it's full markdown, and so you can use this to have a point of view about what something should look like. And then this becomes itself composable, or at least like partially composable, in that with these being on chain, anyone can build an app on top of it that pulls from this librarium. So this librarium is a contract, and in this contract there are stories, and here's something I posted, and here's something Ticklish posted, and here's something Dom posted. This now exists as a transaction, and you can build via subgraph an app on top of it. And so that's what we've done. The way to think about this, someone described this to me and I really liked it, is that the librarium is like the L1, and the I is the first L2 app on top of it. And I guess L1s and L2s are confusing in the space, so maybe that's not the best way to describe it. But it's like the librarium is the platform, and the I is the app. The librarium is a place where you can publish sort of the infinite stories of this world, and then the I is the way to collect them into a visual treatment inside of this NFT. And so that's just what we're doing. We're going to be publishing the first set of Genesis Scroll stories, publishing really cool lore from Loot Explorers, from Realms, from Banners, from Hyperloot, from really from Crypts and Caverns, from every corner of the Lootverse. People are publishing stories to the librarium, and then those short stories are going to show back up inside the eye. And it becomes hopefully like a dynamic and sustaining and an energy producing model for the Lootverse, in that this eye NFT, every time you go to it and every time you refresh it, every time you click the little refresh button, or every time we do a global refresh, should start to contain new stories. It is a dynamic contract that's upgradable, and at some point we could just throw the keys away, and throwing the keys away would be kind of our way of saying, like, let's take the mold, I don't know what the word is, but like the mold you use at the printing press for a comic book or a book, let's take that mold and let's smash it, and let's not make any more of these things, and this is it. Let's not update them, let's not change them. It's printed in the ether forever, and let's call that like the first book of the Lootverse, and more can come on top of that. So that's the idea of the eye. I'm going to share two more things about it that I think are really exciting, and then we can open it up to comments and questions and FAQs and whatever else, or even just high fives, hopefully. But where did the eye come from? The idea here is that the eye in lore form is a really good storytelling device, both physically and metaphorically. And when I say storytelling device, sometimes like a storytelling device allows you to reach in and tell a story about a character in a way that you couldn't without that device. It's like a literary term, a storytelling device. So I think the eye is a storytelling device for the Lootverse, but it's also literally a storytelling device. Like literally, it's a device that contains stories. But metaphorically, it works really well as a storytelling device, because we can say that this eye is an item of the Lootverse, forged in the ancient days, passed down across generations, used by adventurers to preserve the lore and legends and stories of the Lootverse, so that we now, as new adventurers, when we pick it up and we mint it and we own it, we, through the eye, can see the entire past from the beginning of time through to today and through to the future being whatever we create together. And so I think that works really well as what it is. The purpose of it being to provide an adventurer with this like virtual connection to the on-chain librarium, wherever they may be across the realms. If you have an eye in your pocket, you can access the library on the chain. Something I wanted to share here too that I thought was just like kind of awesome for the Lootverse is that not only is it a storytelling device that kind of fits perfectly into the moment for what we need right now, I actually believe that the eye has been hiding in plain sight in the loot bags all along. I'm gonna say this in like kind of a cheeky twinkle in my eye way, because like I don't think Dom intended for this eye to be manifested from the loot bag contract. I think it fits into the broad category of extensions of loot, but there is something kind of cool here. We all know how a loot bag works: weapons, armor, jewelry. There's classes, there's types. It's all deterministic in this contract. What some people didn't realize at the beginning, and probably still don't realize, is that loot is organized with a ton of structure and intentionality. It's not just a collection of hundreds of random fantasy words in a contract that get assembled randomly. There's a ton of structure. There's 8 inventory slots, there's 3 classes, and then each class has 5 items per inventory slot, and these items are rank ordered from top to bottom. So each class with 5 items per inventory slot is the thing I wanted to tease out. That the chest class, or the chest category, has 3 character types: mage, hunter, warrior, and then 5 items per class. This is just a screenshot of the loot contract. I annotated it with some emojis and some words, but this is just a screenshot of the loot contract, clearly set up with 555. The same applies for the foot class, 555. The same applies for hand, 555. The same applies for head, 555. The same applies for waist, 555. When you get to the weapon group, it goes 5544, which to me begs a really interesting question. Where are the missing wands, and where's the missing book? 5544 in the pattern of the whole contract kind of feels like it should be 5555. 5 heavy weapons, 5 medium blade type weapons, and then 5 wands and 5 books. We only have 4, which to me suggests that maybe there once was a top-ranked book, and maybe there once was a top-ranked wand in the lootverse, and maybe it's been lost to time. Maybe it didn't exist in any of these bags. Maybe there's a reason that the early adventurers hid it from us, only to find it now. But I believe that we finally found the top-ranked book for adventurers. It's not a tome or a chronicle or a grimoire. It's an eye. And that the eye itself is the device that represents the top-ranked book for adventurers, an ancient, immutable, permanent, dynamic device that's been passed across the ages from the first Genesis adventure from the beginning of time to our hands today. If you thought I was a loot geek, I think I've earned another loot stripe just now, but would love to hear some feedback on anything that I just shared. Librarium, the eye, or this crazy contract discovery. Assuming anyone's even still on the call. You are.
I'm just so bored over here. No,
and yeah, the team here, I guess I didn't mention everyone's names before, but this team has been a lootverse labor of love. Andrew, Banners, Devin, Loot Hero, Rich, Ziva, who is Ryan, myself, Treppers, who's been the technical hero, Zidara, who's Cam, who's been helping to drive the Genesis Scrolls project. This has been a labor of love from across the board. We also, I guess I want to say one thing to cap this off. We're not launching this as like a promise of a roadmap, or launching this as like the promise of doing a bunch of things with it. We're launching this as a gift and launching this as a piece of art. We hope that everybody likes it, and we hope that everybody values it and cherishes it and collects it and uses it. But unlike a normal NFT project, it's not like, here's 8,000 PFPs, we're going to go build a game, follow along. Or here's a utility pass, buy this utility pass, and we're going to go build a whole company that you get our utility pass. This is something else. To me, it's a piece of art, and the art is words. And amazingly, the words that represent this piece of art may not have all been written yet. It's going to be a mint. It'll have a mint cost. The current plan right now is a 0.16 ETH mint with 1,600 eyes to mint. And we've committed that the majority of that ETH, unlike a normal NFT project that just like goes to the team, the majority of the ETH, so at least 50% of it, is going to go right back into the Open Quill writing grants program and right back to community writers. And so the idea here is like launching this thing as a celebration of the stories, launching it as a publishing pass that kickstarts the librarium process and opens people's eyes to what's possible with on-chain storytelling, launching it as an experiment in collaborative world building, but also launching it as a method to help fund writers by using these at least half the mint fees to go to grants to community writers, which I think will be positive news for everybody who's participating in the writing part of the Lootverse so far. And it's also, like I said, it's a canvas for the Lootverse to bring this world to life and see what we can do together by both creating the infinite stories on chain, but also then curating them up into this device and treating this device like a collectible artifact.
Can I just say I'm like literally like jumping up with like giddy joy with that like derived eye thing in the contract. And then also this is like so amazing. You guys are just I'm having such a this is so heartwarming and incredible. But seriously, like I can't imagine where so much of this universe would be without you guys. You're really carrying so much of the community on your back, and it just makes me so grateful to be a part of this whole crazy experiment. So this is so cool. Okay, fun.
You're giving me goosebumps, Glassa. Thank you.
Yeah, that comes with a round of applause, I think. Tim Shaw, I think it's permissionless publishing by the holders, and then there's a curation level for what appears on the eye. Just curious how you guys will do that.
Yeah. So I don't think everything in this universe should be decentralized. I'll start with that comment. And I don't think everything in this universe should be permissionless, that anyone can come into an office and like grab all the computers and leave, or that anybody can grab the megaphone and grab the megaphone. I think it's okay to have progressive decentralization, and I think it's okay to have progressive on-chainification. It's okay to have progressive CCOification. To me, it's all a spectrum. And the reason I answer that question that way is that the eye is set up so that it's a curation device on top of the librarium. Truly, any holder can publish anything to the librarium, just like Ticklish posted this crazy Polly's art sketch this morning, and that's awesome. And so this is wide open. What the eye will be is a curated set of stories pulled into this Genesis eye, and the curation process is being managed right now by the Curators Council. And that Curators Council is a handpicked group of people that the Open Quill team essentially has asked to participate, or people who've raised their hands and said, hey, I really want to commit some time to this and really give my brain to this. And so the short answer to your question is the Curators Council, which is a group of 10 of us, are managing the curation decision making for what gets curated globally. But also, if people are really excited about it, we could have the ability to do local curation, which would mean that the owner of each eye could also curate some stories locally. So they could write their own stories to the librarian and then curate them back up to their eye individually. Or they could say, hey, I see that Dom's story Bags wasn't curated globally, but I'd like to have it curated on my own eye, so I'm going to curate that one locally to my own. So long answer to your question, but hopefully everyone vibes off of that thought.
Yeah,
Any thoughts or reactions to that? Yeah, you're for it. Cool.
Yeah, I was more curious. Considering potentially writing something and publishing it. I mean, it's kind of nice to know there's a bit of safeguard there as far as it being a good fit for the project. And I'm sure there'll be opportunities for writer's room or just popping in, Quill and chatting.
Yeah, and anyone can publish anything to the librarium, so any holder can. And I think it'll be a fluid process by which we globally curate from the librarium into the eye. And I don't think there's a perfect answer yet. I think we're going to figure it out as we go. We do know the first month or so, because we have a ton of content that's been handcrafted and created and edited and curated over the past number of months by the Open Quill program and the writer's room and the Curators Council. I mean, as an amazing metaphor for how much attention to detail is happening here. Taxel, who's been I think Taxel, you might be on here. Are you on today? You are, nice. Taxel, I'm just going to quote you and embarrass you for a second. You were asking, like, hey, I'm doing copy editing, which is, like, the most wonderful job in the world. Doing copy editing is like doing contract audits. It's like, it's not your work, but you're giving your own brain and your own heart and your own soul to it. This is Taxel saying, hey, I'm deeply familiar with AP style, but Chicago could be interesting too in terms of the style of editing that we're doing for this content. And so we are thinking deeply. And if you thought we were geeks, there's a couple of private channels like this Curators Council where it gets extremely geeky. I do want to shout out to Taxel though. Taxel has stepped up on the Curators Council and done a ton of copy editing and super thoughtful curation and feedback. Feedback is a gift is kind of a cliche, but it's really true for writers. Giving somebody deep, thoughtful feedback really is a gift. And so thank you, Taxel, for doing what you've been doing. Same for, I don't really need to say thank yous yet, but Banners has also been quietly really hoisting the story side of the Lootverse on his shoulders. I don't know if you want to say anything here in terms of your thoughts and feelings and hopes and dreams for this, but you have, without too much fanfare, been kind of carrying this story world on your shoulders. Your mic's not working if you're trying to talk. So much IT challenge today. All right, no worries.
Well, I switched to my mobile just because I wanted to say, wow. Wow. Very cool. Good job.
Thanks, Standard Combo. Okay, well, I would love to have further conversations about this asynchronously as well. Jin, you're still on. So what you mentioned makes a ton of sense here, and now you can see why I was excited to share the librarium. Talking about like a D-work type system or a writer's room type system where you have a little bit more structure and a little bit more, opinionated UX than just a crazy Discord channel. If you have an idea of how you could implement technology that supports a writer's room model for the Lootverse using a D-work system or something else, 100%, where everyone's wide open to that idea. And then also 1337, if you're still on too, I think he's gone, but 1337 was talking about like a multimedia, infinite database on chain somewhere where you could host art and music and stories and more. I kind of feel like that could be the librarium. Right now it's built to publish the written word, and it is built to publish though, like I said before, with
does that support Markdown?
Yeah, it's full Markdown. That's what I was gonna say. So as full Markdown, this thing here can also take images too. So this has full Markdown. We have a point of view about how to interpret the Markdown on the librarium itself, but as you guys know with Markdown, obviously you can style it however you want. This can also support images. So just like Ticklish's example, this is an image like inside the Markdown itself. So I think, I don't know, I don't want to promise too much here, but this is open source, and Treppers, maybe like if anyone else wanted to help here, that would be incredible to upgrade the librarium to be not just storytelling, but also multimedia as well.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah, so the librarium is currently it's storing all of the written word kind of as an emit that's being stored onto the blockchain, and then the subgraph is what's pulling it down and making it composable. But it could also just easily point to an IPFS, directly to an IPFS record, or the main content itself could be an IPFS or Arweave. So the ability to expand this into stuff past the written word is actually there's lots of avenues and paths forward here for the librarium. We just wanted to build essentially the first, I guess, reference project that would utilize the librarium, which is the eye. But hope that others kind of do pick up with it and kind of start building it out and finding other use cases for it, because we do think there is a lot of interesting things here that we could do. But time was limited, so we just wanted to.
We lost you there at the end, Treppers. Today is just an audio challenge day.
Oh.
Now you're back.
Okay. I don't know where I left off.
It's probably the last comment that this is the first. Yeah, the eye is the first app on top of the librarium. Yeah. This is open for anyone else to build stuff. And hey, if somebody else wanted to build another Lootverse product, even feel free. But also, if people are working across the hyperverse, I can definitely imagine a world where people are starting to publish stories across chain runners or nouns or cryptodes or whatever, and use this librarium as kind of like a cross ecosystem on-chain storytelling tool. And then on top of each of them, you can build your own apps. Maybe for the Lootverse, it's the eye. Maybe for chain runners, it's a Somnus terminal, and it looks different and it acts different, but still contains the on-chain stories. So there's a lot of like ifs and visioning to the future. I want to get this out, and I want to see what feedback is, and hopefully the world's energy is as positive as the energy on this phone call. But sometimes we are the geekiest of the geeks when it comes to celebration of what's possible with the blockchain. This is surely not an 8K cartoon animal collection. It's something a lot different and a little more esoteric. The plan is to mint this weekend. So if you haven't signed up for the pre-mint yet, here's the link. Linktree, yeah, here's the link to the pre-mint. I'll pop it into general, actually. If you hold any Lootverse item, you'll be able to sign up for the pre-mint. Again, it is a paid mint. We did spend a ton of time working on this, and so the goal here is to do it as a paid mint to like hopefully mark the moment. And like I said, use half the ETH from this at least to fund writers back through writers grants. Here's the pre-mint link. Also, I'll share this because this is kind of fun. If you haven't seen this Twitter handle yet, it's Genesis INFT, a little mouthful, but Genesis INFT. And we've got a pretty awesome tweet here that's gotten a ton of retweets and just some love on it. It always bugs me when people say things like, when are the developers gonna do something? Or Loot is dead. A lot of outsiders are often like, Loot is dead. The dev team gave up. I'm like, there never was a dev team. There never was a roadmap. Loot is more of like a permanent foundation or permanent invitation for others. And so it always truthfully bugs me a little bit when people are like, when's the Loot dev team going to follow through on their promises? Because there was no promises and there is no dev team.
Yeah, Tim, I think that's what we can achieve with, I think during the Gitcoin round 15, do a little hitting magic and, try to change the outside perception of it. I think that's where the Twitter spaces can come in. If we can connect with someone who, has, like from an outside view on the Web3 space, someone with a lot of following maybe on Twitter, that could be, we can invite as like a co-host, something like that, what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I love that. And I think this is a good place to start. Like, let's reclaim that sentiment. Like, Loot is dead. Yeah, look at this phone call; it's dead. Look at all these 40 people on this phone call, and a year of people showing up every week and every month, surprising ourselves. I think Loot is dead is kind of a cool way to embrace that. So if you want, pop in, give us your eulogy for loot. But yeah, standard combo, I love that. You and me will schedule, or we'll coordinate over the next week, and then maybe next Thursday we can do this as a Twitter space and do it in a more public way. I'm gonna go back to my agenda. I think this is everything that we had on like the formal agenda today. Any other thoughts or questions or feedback or ideas about Librarium or or just the idea of sort of collaborative world building for the Lootverse?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I had this, great work there, Tim Shell, and I was wondering about that eye. I can so imagine it as a 3D asset as well. You have a 3D eye that someone can use perhaps in an AR kind of space. It kind of tickles my fancy. I'm wondering what you think of, have you thought about that?
Nice. My fancy is tickled too. Treppers, what would you say there?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we chat about. Obviously not part of the V1 or V0, but something that we would maybe one day want to get to, or in another version of it. I mean, there's an entire world in which you could have loot as an AR project too, I'm sure. Yeah, so there are interesting ways you go with it. But yeah, this is... yeah, I feel like we're just, again, laying the foundation. This is what I got cut off when I was trying to describe this as a reference project for the librarium, and you know, loot, everything's a loot reference project, I guess. But yeah, kind of used as a standard that people can build upon.
Just cutting in and building off of that, have a vision of this being a physical item also that you plug into your computer and you get sort of like a cold wallet of just the entire librarium. I think that'd be very cool, but that's obviously way down the line. I actually had a question regarding the OpenQuill stuff. Is that going to be uploaded? Will that be looked at and reviewed before? What's the shaping process? Because I contributed to some, and I know for sure that there are some things that need to be tweaked in grammar or just the way the story develops. So in that regard, when is that content getting uploaded to the librarium?
The good news is that you will be able to do the uploading yourself. All the writers in the writer's room are going to be getting a free mint of one of these. And then ongoing, writers will be able to get independent publishing passes. The Eye isn't the only publishing pass to the librarium. The librarium has its own publishing pass collection. So the librarium key or librarium Genesis pass or write pass will also be able to be used to publish the librarium. The idea that these aren't as precious in a sense, and that we can give these out to writers, but the Genesis writers who helped bring this Genesis scroll stuff to life are each going to get one of these Genesis Eye artifacts for free. But that's a long-winded way of saying that you're going to post it yourself, and you're going to be able to go to publish and record. And if you publish something, it will be permanent on the blockchain. But if you say, oh shit, I made a typo, there's a revoke function. And so you can say, hey, I, with my wallet, am revoking this transaction hash. I've updated this transaction, so revoke it. It'll still live there, but it emits a revoke transaction that's seen upstream by any of the apps. So the apps can say, I'm going to ignore the revoked transactions. And actually, I'm going to laugh to myself here too, because Dom posted his bags entry today, and as I was reading it, I realized there was a typo. Everything from Treshter. So maybe we'll leave that typo there, or maybe he'll want to do a revoke and a replace on this. In terms of process, anyone can publish, anyone who's a holder of a librarium pass, one of these, or an I, can publish to the librarium. And then the Curators Council will be constantly going through and saying, hey, writer, I love that. If it's set as CCO, I'm just going to unilaterally curate it up. Or if somebody publishes something and says, hey, this isn't CCO, so I don't really want people to use it without my permission, we still, as a Curators Council, might say, hey, I know you set it to all rights reserved, but would you be okay granting a right for us to be able to publish it to the Genesis Eye?
Cool, thanks. I'm pumped.
Sweet. What else in here? Banners or trappers or anybody else? We can do another call once it's like live and out in the world and people are playing with it and using it. But I wanted to share it with the inner circle here first before we launched it to the wider universe.
Well, what's the cost like for pushing it all up, like as a transaction for publishing? And then while you answer that, when's Finger, the missing wand item?
I know.
Announce that project next, I hope.
Yes, well, that was also what I was hoping there. I'll answer your first question. Because it's an emit on the contract, it's not that expensive. So this is an example of a story. This is a small story. This is like my welcome post, or whatever, a couple hundred words. We tested, obviously on Rinkby a ton, and the numbers look pretty good. I think you'll be able to get like 5,000 words up here for $10 or $15 of gas. This is $1 or $2 of gas to get this thing published. Let's see, this one here, Ticklish's posts, spent $2 in gas, and that's at 13. So there's no rush on these, so you can publish these late at night or whatever, stage the transactions with low gas. So I'm feeling pretty good about the gas. I think also having like a slight bit of gas, like a couple dollars, is helpful, because it means that people, even though this is like gated by holding the token, it means that people like won't just post a bunch of random crap to it, or if they do post a bunch of random crap, whatever, it's like a database. It's okay if the database contains a bunch of crap, as long as you curate the best stuff out into your app. To your other question or comment, though, which I know is sort of a joke, but I totally am with you. If we believe in this hidden lore that there's a top-ranked wand and a top-ranked book, I'd like to propose that the top-ranked book is the Eye, and it's wide open canvas for somebody to build a top-ranked wand. And maybe like what we're trying to do here is show a mechanic for it or a model for it, that it's not just like, oh, somebody makes a random thing, but do it in a really thoughtful way, and do it in a way that hopefully brings something to the universe.
I would say you've set the precedent quite well.
One more thing I'd say about this too, this is my hopes and dreams, but my hope and dream for this is that this product, this Eye, is seen as an entry point into our universe, not a derivative thing that you only get if you're deep in the universe. Meaning, this could be dismissed as like, oh, I don't need an iPhone case, I don't have an iPhone. Or like, why do I need the Mac power adapter, I don't have a MacBook. And I think that would be a fail if it's thought of that way. A lot of derivative projects usually are thought of that way. Like, I don't have cyber brokers, why do I need a mecha arm? I don't even have the main thing. In this case, because it's multimedia, often the entry point into a multimedia universe is like one artifact. I'm sitting in my library here in real life, and I'm looking around and like holding the Dune book in your hand might be an entry point into the crazy wild world of Dune, which is multimedia and fan fiction and game stuff and kids stuff, and like it's a whole world. Or holding, I don't know what, like, what's another good example here? I mean, there's a million examples of what I'm trying to describe here, but I'm hoping that, let's go to my Spider-Man comic book. Like, I'm hoping maybe the way that a kid picks up a Spider-Man comic book, and that Spider-Man comic book contains a self-contained world that just captures their energy and attention. If that's their first experience with Spider-Man, amazing. That comic book itself is a full and complete artifact. But for some people, they'll say, wow, what is this world? I want more. I want to dive into this world. I want to watch the show. I want to read more. I want to find more stuff about this world. I want to buy more of the books. I want to pay for more of the movies. I want to play the game. I want to wear the costume for Halloween. The difference is for loot, if and as people do that, as they go down the rabbit hole, they'll realize, wait, I'm not just paying to consume content here. I'm being invited to create together. And that really is the magic of decentralized, permissionless world building, that at the end of that rabbit hole and probably not even that far down that rabbit hole. As you go down it and as you get interested in the lore and legends and facts and fictions and the stories and the concepts and the games and the artifacts and the characters and the conflicts, as you dive in, at some point you'll realize, wait, who's creating this? We're all creating this. It's not that they created this and I'm consuming it, but like we, or I am part of that they now. Like I am part of this project, and I'm not required to create, but I am invited to create. And there's no governing body I need to ask permission to. I don't need to request to Disney to see if it's okay if I write a book about Star Wars. I don't need to request to the Marvel Cinematic Universe to see if it's okay if I make costumes for Halloween. I can just do it. And that really is the magic of the Lootverse. So all that said, I'm hoping that that's how the wider Hyperverse sees this. That this is not a derivative side project of Loot, but this is an invitation into a decentralized fantasy story world that's only really just beginning. Those are my hopes and dreams for this. But also, like all Web3 projects, who knows? Sometimes things hit and sometimes they don't. Hopefully this hits, and this weekend will be a really exciting one. It's been a pretty sleepless past month for us, and a pretty busy past 6 months working on this. And a lot of the work has been not only technology, but also the systems thinking and the creation of the thing, and the creation of the stories. The stories are the art here. And so if you're curious and haven't realized what's going on, scroll down the Discord, go to the open quill section. There's a handful of channels, and the writer's room is the big one. We have been furiously working to manifest the stories and characters and conflicts of the Lootverse for the past 6 months. And this eye will be a celebration of all that work. Can I drop a mic? I guess one doesn't ask permission to drop the mic, but I think let's call it. Unless anybody else has stuff you want to talk about.
Talk about with the eye, or talk about what's further presentation?
Anything, yeah. Actually, Tyler, I was trying to call on you before you were hopped on. Sorry to hog so much, but now that you're back, if you want to present something totally different, mic is still open. Feel free.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry for not being on earlier, and I don't know how to follow that very well, so we'll see. All right. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. Let me know when you are able to see my screen. Am I up?
We got you. Yeah, fabric and frames.
Well, excellent. I did notice that there are some people on here who might not have seen my project before. I've been working on it for a while, so I have a shortened sort of intro to what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to build, and the project as presented here on screen. It's called Fabric Frames and Follies, or just Follies for short. And it's a project of primitives to enrich and expand the Web3 built environment. So we've got a lot of stuff going on in the Lootverse, and I'm inspired by that. And when Loot came out, I really wanted to build something right away. Probably about 2 weeks after Loot came out, I missed the original mint, but I knew I wanted to build places of some sort. And I started by looking at, what are the possibilities for building place in Lootverse. I was originally thinking of just what about algorithmically generated buildings, stuff like a cellar or, a bed chamber, those sort of things. But it didn't really hold my attention very well. I quickly started looking at these little constructions that exist in our environment that weren't really buildings. Take, for instance, this well that I've got circled in here. Those things started to stick out to me. They don't easily fit into the reasons why we build space, which are, usually shelter, safety, security, work, community. They didn't fit there very well, and that intrigued me.
an architecture typology book, they might call these things a folly. And follies, they're often defined as like a construction with no real purpose. But as I began to brainstorm various things that I could include in this collection, it really pointed to there actually is some functionality for these things. These follies, they support an extended fabric of our existence, as I write here, and they frame important activities. You know, a column or totem, it tells the story of a village if you engrave upon it. A town, an empire, or people. This is Justinian's column on the screen. Traversing a maze that can focus your mind, that brings you closer to the understanding of a higher power. Some of our cultures view maze that way. A well gives us water, it regenerates life. And gazebos, they provide a space for rest and repose. So I felt that each of these things really does have an applicable use case that can be gamified. To put it simply, follies create a diorama for action, for connection, for storytelling. Metaphorically speaking, a folly is a primitive diorama with composable traits. One of the first follies that I thought of, and I just made this outside of the coding, is the Grove of Hyven Hollow. And I've written a story about it, written a poem about it. It's actually in the Open Quill project. Still have some edits to do, but it's there. And that's the story itself. I really tried to aim to speak to morals that might exist within the Lootverse, like stay true to your quest, don't waver from your search. So this grove that is one of the original follies, it rewards those who are committed, and it punishes those who are not. But that was a little piece that I came to, a little idea to try and expand upon the lore of what a folly is. And as you can see on the screen, this here is what a folly in the Lootverse looks like. And everything up to this point really has been presented in the past. It's stuff that exists on the Follies website. And so at this point, I just want to give a few updates of where I'm at. I've had some conversations, couple quick conversations with Briefway from the CNC, the Crypts and Caverns project. He's doing great things there. I've had a couple of calls with Glosso of the Sea, who is, we all know he's an amazing brain. And so we've come up with some really interesting ways to think about this project as well. In developing further from those conversations, I focused back on helping space become place and coding follies to provide for layered meaning, which is something that the Lootverse does really well. And I also have some metadata, some architecture developments with new traits and some composability that I think expands upon this ability to layer meaning in the project, like use, enriching built-ins and features. I'll get a little more in that later. Expressing vessels, and then the idea of engraving. So refocusing on making places, the question is, how do we build space, and how do we make it a place? These follies are in effect just a space. So how do you make it place in this world? And place, I feel, is a construction of the human mind. So animal minds sort of have an ability to create place, but really it's human minds as well, and that our beliefs lead to our actions, our perceptions, which develop meaning and value inside of our mind. So space with meaning is place. Meaning and value for a Web3 primitive, which follies will be, it's layered on by content creators. There's pre-held personal beliefs and perceptions. Something like gazebos are dope. We all like those, and therefore that creates some meaning in our minds. But then there's also imagination, like art development. This all happened with the Loot project itself. You know, potential gameplay, lore development, like open quill writing, derivative contracts. All that information has layered meaning into our universe built upon the initial primitive. The folly, the first layer of meaning for the folly, it'll be coded into the IP specific root contract. So I'll start by saying that I'm building the project to be IP agnostic. And the first contract to come out of the project will be focused on the lootverse. So in developing meaning there, that means there'll be rarity, prefixes, suffixes, orders, materials. The Grove of Hyven Hollow is the ruined walled grove of reflection. So it has that order there. But follies also have use, and a function of a folly, in the contract, it'll be expressed as a value. So the meaning of what that value represents, it can be derived in follow-on projects. It can be imbued. So you can derive it in, if you stake stake something, or whatever you build on top of this can push what that use value means. Here's just an example of a folly with a little breakdown, and this is an update on enriching the built-in. So each folly has a root structure, and then it has a number of built-ins and a number of features based on the size of the folly. So built-ins, if you think of an altar, that would be potentially a root structure. A built-in would be a plinth upon which that altar sits. And the features might be some sort of basin that sits in the altar, or maybe a cask or a chest or something like that that also accompanies the altar. And I think that adding these pieces was, the intention was to allow imagination to express itself on these follies, allow people to figure out ways that they can use them specifically, or things that they could potentially do. Just sort of open the door to possibilities, and an enrichment that I've recently come to in discussions with Glosso D is to provide some sort of modifier to built-ins and features. One of those being the possibility of it being engraved. I don't think that the original contract expresses what an engraving might be, but the original contract will algorithmically determine if a basin is engraved. And if something's engraved, then I feel like that engraving can mean or be anything that somebody could imagine. And I can imagine some sort of derivative of product creating what those engravings might mean, or what those engravings might be. It could be anything from, it could be symbols, it could be runes, it could be stories or poems. It could be a story in the librarium. Maybe the original founding of that story was engraved in a folly. You could even go beyond that. It could be gobbledygook. It could be just junk. It could be symbols from like the Warhammer universe. I am imagining the Necron symbology, the language that they use. Or it could even be contracts. If you really got into it, you could imagine maybe a circle of stones that are all engraved with the contracts from the main pieces of the lootverse. Maybe it's some sort of Rosetta Stone of engraved contracts. That might be cool. I don't know. So I've added this enrichment as an attempt to influence or muse more creativity and composability. I'm also expressing vessels. When I was thinking about what is a built-in, what is a feature, things like a niche or a basin, these things bubbled up in my mind of what is something that's built into these pieces. And they're vessels of some sort or another. So, a niche can be a solid vessel. A basin is a liquid vessel. There might even be no vessels at all. And the contract the metadata will express what type of vessel is in this folly, so that derivative contracts or something else can work with that, flow with that, build on top of that. Maybe there's an airdrop of potions to all of the follies with a liquid vessel. Maybe if a module is built in the Realms game for folly, It might impact crafting. Maybe you can now craft potions, or you can craft, maybe you can craft Greek fire for your raid in the Realms universe because you have an alchemy engine with a basin or something like that. That could be pretty cool. And then I wanted to go a little more into engravings. The metadata, it will express if a built-in or feature is engraved. The contract, it won't express what the engraving is, and that leaves it open to interpretation and imagination and derivative projects. So, that's where I'm at, and I'm really excited about the possibilities. I think that there's all kinds of possibilities for what these things could do within a game, within the Lootverse, within the idea of the librarium and its ability to inspire lore. I think there's a ton of collaborations possible. Derivatives for vessels and engravings, lore in the librarium, the Genesis Eye, crypts and caverns and staking and realms and crafting. I think that all of those things are possible. So that's what keeps me energized and keeps me going. I'm currently debugging right now, and I'll probably be alpha testing in a couple. But that's it. That's where I'm at. And this last page, I do have to say, this piece of art on the screen is my kid, who's only 13. He drew that, and I was like, "What is this?" He's like, I just drew it. It's like, holy cow, this is Follies, dude. Okay, so anyway, that's where I end. Thank you guys for listening.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. Really cool. Do you have any specific feedback that you want or questions you want to ask everybody?
Not at this time, Trappers. If you're the brains behind the technology, I might have questions for you in the future.
Sure. You can ping me whenever you want.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this project. Yeah, super pumped. Tyler, this is awesome.
I think let's call it. Welcome to some new people. I definitely see some new faces on today in Sasquatch. We know each other from the wider Hyperverse here, but awesome to see you in the mix. Others, I'm not gonna call everybody's names out, but yeah, awesome to see what's happening here. And let's schedule another one, maybe at a different time next week or the week after, so we can do like a real deep dive on Realms. Realms doesn't get enough love on the weekly calls just because of the timing. But if you haven't kept up with Realms, OMG, there's some amazing stuff going on right now. Biblioteca DAO.xyz, follow it on Twitter too. The Eternal Game is near, or at least the V1 of it, and just the energy and the work and the community and more within Realms and Biblioteca is outstanding right now. Cool, yeah, standard combo, thanks. You can talk to Lord of a Few about timing. And yeah, let's do a Twitter Space version of this and see how that goes. I'm gonna test the Periscope thing that somebody mentioned.
Sounds cool.
All right, everybody, really good stuff today. Writers, if there's other writers on the call here, I posted into Writers Room with a note right now, but the librarium's open, so please use your writing pass to publish to it. Feel free to publish anything you want. And if you don't have a writing pass and you want one, DM me. And eventually, like I said, the eye itself will be like a publishing pass to the librarium too, but there's sort of the skeleton key pass that we can issue out to individual writers as well. Should be an exciting weekend. Loot's anniversary /birthday is in 48 hours. And so hopefully we can capture a moment, capture the zeitgeist, and get people excited about this crazy thing. Okay, take care all.